Hey, what's going on everyone? In this more casual review, we'll be taking a look at a rare high grade that might actually be a step up from its master grade counterpart. This is the high grade Gouf Custom. Even if you haven't seen the 08th MS team, I'm willing to bet you've at least seen that iconic Gouf Custom fight scene. It really is one of the best mecha fight scenes out there. So of course, the Gouf Custom is a must-buy for many people. While I'd usually tell people to pick up the master grade, considering that kit is over 20 years old at this point, I think this high grade is definitely worth looking at. So we'll be looking at this high grade Gunpla in the usual 4 categories: the build, appearance, articulation, and the gimmicks. Hopefully this review can help you decide if you're going to go for the master grade or try picking up this high grade instead. Alright, now let's jump right into this build. Being a 2010 high grade, this build was really simple. Of course, there's no inner frame here, which could lead to pretty poor part separation, but thanks to this suit being a fairly monotone blue, that's not really an issue here. Pretty much everything comes in its correct color. Also, despite the engineering here being the usual polycap sandwich type, the part separation and location of these seam lines is really well thought out. There really weren't that many terrible seam lines here, outside of the usual one on the shoulder. Thankfully, there's this big horn on top, which is a separate piece. It does a great job of distracting you from the seam line. This high grade's build is actually really surprising, as you'd think the master grade with its more in-depth inner frame would have a lot more to offer here. But even with this high grade's more streamlined build, you're not really missing much once he's actually put together. The great part separation here also means there's no real need for stickers either, since everything is molded in its correct color. Even these clear orange triangles in the chest are separate pieces. This is all around pretty amazing stuff for a high grade, and would totally make for a great first kit for beginners. The only real issue I had building this kit were these panel lines. Getting ink to hold in some of these lines can be really difficult, as they tend to be either too shallow or have rounded edges. Of course, with this bluish color scheme and the usual sloping curves found in Xeon type suits, panel lines aren't super noticeable anyways, so you might be able to get away with skipping a few of them. I will make a note though, that I'm not the biggest fan of how the piping on this chest was handled. It's a single piece of plastic on each side that you bend at specific locations. It looks pretty cheap, especially at these bends. I think I would have preferred a piece with molded in curves instead, as it probably would have looked a bit cleaner. Moving on to the painting. Again, thanks to the great part separation, there really is nothing mandatory here. But being a high grade, there's definitely a few places you can touch up. I haven't done many of these yet, but here are my plans at least. First up is the pink mono eye. It's not a separate piece here, but instead built into this rotating black piece. I'm just using the provided sticker here, but I could see a pink Gundam marker really improving it. You could also paint the surrounding area darker black, just to bump up that contrast. Next, we have these triangles on the chest, which come in a fairly dull orange. I'd really like to paint them a brighter color if I can. It is a separate piece, so it shouldn't be too difficult to get looking good. Moving on to the back of this suit, you could always use a little bit of paint inside these thrusters. I think a red would look really nice in this case. I'd then use some black for the inside of these thrusters on the legs, just to make them stand out more. On the arm, you could use black inside this launcher, just to add some depth. You'll probably notice too, that this is supposed to have a little gray insert, but mine popped off and went missing, so yeah, definitely keep an eye on that piece if you can. Lastly, I think I'll use gray paint for this panel line on the side of the thigh, since there's a nice deep channel here. I tested some gray in the channel on the back of the leg, and I really like how it looks, but I could see black working too. And that's all the basic detailing I can think of off the top of my head. But being a high grade, there's always more creative ways to get this guy looking good. Speaking of looking good, let's take a look over this Gouf Custom's appearance. Something I really like about the high grade line of Gunpla is that they don't try to break the mold too much with their appearance. There's no needless panel lines, hatches, or tick marks here. I honestly can't find any major changes here. This Gouf Custom is pure anime accuracy, and I'm a huge fan. Really, when it comes to high grades, it's more about the locations of stickers and seam lines, and just how noticeable they are that can really make or break their appearance. Thankfully, both of those aren't really an issue here thanks to that amazing part separation. Bandai could just put this Gouf Custom in 1/100th scale, call it an RE100, and I doubt most people would mind. The proportions on this kit are also pretty great. While he's a little slimmed up compared to his anime appearance, it's nothing super noticeable. I have noticed though, that a lot of these curves have been sharpened up as well. They really add to the more demonic aesthetic of the Gouf Custom. Regardless, these proportions are about as perfect as you can get. Next up, I really like these colors too. While the black could stand to be a little bit darker, the main colors, the light and dark blue, are just spot on. I don't see any need for a full paint job here. These colors are just perfect the way they are. Being a high grade though, you don't get any decals here. It's literally just a sticker for the mono eye and another for the scope on one of his weapons. Of course, with how closely this kit lines up with his anime appearance, I wouldn't be into using too many caution sign decals anyways, so it's fine by me. All in all, this kit just looks awesome, nailing the more straightforward approach of high-grade Gunpla. I honestly wish I could get this more anime-accurate take in 1/100th scale. Speaking of 1/100th scale though, this is one instance where there isn't much difference between the high grade and master grade. Both look pretty fantastic. I will note though that the master grade comes with a set of decals, so if you're into detailing, you might want to give that one a try instead. So far, I've really been impressed with this high grade Gouf Custom, but let's see if he can keep it going with this articulation. As usual, starting with these feet, they're just bricks. Nothing out of the ordinary for a 2010 high grade. There are a few swivels and a ball joint in the ankle, so you do get some solid movement here. They can kind of cover for the lack of articulation from the foot. You get slightly more than a 90-degree bend from this knee. Not the best, but it's passable. About on par with the master grade at least. The hips are the standard polycap swivel type, with an extra spin below. Combine this with those ankles, and you can get some decent standing poses here. There's also a spinning mechanism in these hips that allow you to rotate them forwards and backwards. It's pretty simple, but could be really useful for mixing up your ground options. While you should get some movement from the skirts, because of this piping and how tightly packed they are, you're not really going to get much. This piping also really limits the ball joint in the waist. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of this piping, as it doesn't really help articulation, and it looks pretty cheap. Anyway, moving on to these shoulders, it's the usual polycap ball joint, but you do get a solid pop out as well. This is super useful for some shooting poses. The shoulder also has a joint inside that allows for some decent lateral movement. Combined with the ability to move the shoulder armor out of the way, and you get some really great movement here. Working our way down the arm, we get the standard spin on top with a solid connection point. You do only get a 90-degree bend from this elbow though. Next up, the hands are on the standard polycap ball joint. Nothing too crazy here. These hands are about what you'd expect from a high grade, mainly being the kind that open up for weapon replacement. You will notice that there are no pegs here, but because his weapon's attached to the wrist, they really aren't needed here. I've had no issues whatsoever with these hands. Lastly, let's take a look at his head. It's the standard double ball joint setup, but you can move the mono eye on its own, thanks to having a little switch underneath. This is always appreciated, as it means you don't have to pop off the head every time you want to move the eye. In general, being a 2010 high grade, you get all the basic articulation you'd expect. I found it's totally enough for your usual action poses, but it is a little weak if you're more familiar with newer kits. It's honestly about on par with the master grade. However, with this high grade being smaller and using more modern engineering, I have found it to be quite a bit sturdier. You should be able to get some solid poses here, especially when you include all these gimmicks. First up, we have his iconic sword. It comes as a single gray piece, so you might want some silver paint for the blade. Technically, this handle is supposed to be blue too, but I'm not even going to try to color match this unique light blue. Anyway, there's no weight issues here, and he can hold it just fine thanks to a dedicated hand. Next up, we have his heat wire. This is such a cool gimmick. This wire actually has a metal core inside, so it can maintain some basic posing. It's just perfect for how mobile this suit is in the anime. Moving on to his basic machine gun, unlike the standard Gouf, which has it built into his hand, this Gouf Custom uses a separate piece that you pop on and off with a polycap. It looks really solid, and even has a mild build to it. This machine gun also doesn't cause any weight issues, so I keep it on pretty much all the time. Like most Gouf variants, this suit comes with a hilariously tiny shield. I do really like that this dark blue is a separate piece though, as it easily could have been a pad sticker. You can attach this shield on top of the machine gun. This connection piece for the shield can be a little loose though, so I just use some glue to tighten it up. And now for the main attraction, this huge 75mm Gatling gun. It just slides right onto the shield, no problem, and it stays locked in place pretty firmly. There's also some decent part separation here. Not as much as the master grade, but definitely enough for some easy painting. This high grade does have one major improvement over that master grade though, in that this kit can actually hold its Gatling gun. Yeah, thanks to this groove in the shoulder, he can hold the entire weight of this Gatling gun outright. It's pretty crazy to look at. The master grade can't even compare here. That kit could never hold its Gatling gun up, and it's one of the major disappointments of that kit. This high grade, however, is one of the best implementations of a large weapon that I've seen so far. And that about sums up these gimmicks. I'm really impressed by everything you get here and how perfectly everything works too. The Gatling gun alone makes these gimmicks a major step up from that master grade. Alright, it's time to wrap all this up here. I really enjoyed this high grade Gouf Custom. It's a step up from the master grade in many respects. While the build may have been kinda bare bones by comparison, mainly being polycap sandwiches, the part separation more than made up for it. The appearance is also exactly what I'm looking for, nailing a very clean, anime-accurate aesthetic. Then you have these gimmicks that all work flawlessly, with really no issues. It's not even a contest with that master grade. The only area I would say this kit doesn't quite hold up is in its articulation, where it's a noticeable downgrade compared to modern high grades. It's actually about the same as that dated master grade. However, thanks to its smaller size, it doesn't have nearly the weight issues. So again, this high grade kinda beats out the master grade here. If you've just seen the 08th MS team and you're trying to find a good version of the Gouf Custom in model kit form, this high grade is definitely the way to go. Alright, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe or follow me on Instagram and Twitter. You can also leave any questions about this kit in the comments below, and I'm more than happy to get back to you. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you next time.